May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be pleasing in your sight, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Please be seated. If you have ever walked into St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, then you know that that building does something to you. It doesn't just impress you, it recalibrates your entire sense of scale. As you walk in, you notice those markings set into the floor, bronze lines embedded in the marble. Each line is labeled with the name of another great cathedral somewhere in the world. Notre Dame in Paris ends here. So you get a sense of where these cathedrals end in terms of the big things. So you're walking down the beginning, the front of it, you see a line that says Notre Dame ends here. Westminster Cathedral in London ends here. And the Duomo in Florence, it ended somewhere back there. And with each marking, you realize, wow, this place is massive. The lines don't just make the other cathedrals seem small. It makes St. Peter's impossibly and unimaginably large. It helps you see the basilica for what it really is. Now, if you were to go to Jerusalem, you can still see part of the retaining wall of the Second Temple, the temple, that same temple complex that stood in Jesus' lifetime. And standing there, looking at what remains, just what remains, you begin to understand why the disciples of Jesus were so impressed with the temple complex. In some sections, the cut limestone blocks are 45 feet long by 10 feet high and 10 feet deep, making even modern-day cranes struggle to lift something like this. Stones that were cut, they were quarried, transported, and set into place 2,000 years ago. So this temple in Jesus' time was one of the ancient wonders of the ancient world. For the disciples, the temple was not just a building. When they look at it and they say to Jesus, "Look, teacher, what large stones," they weren't just giving an architectural review. They were marveling at the most sacred, most enduring thing in their life. And that makes Jesus' response to these words feel like a bucket of ice cold water. Not one of these stones will remain standing, but all of them will be thrown down. You can just feel the disciples' shock at hearing these words. You all remember when we woke up one morning and learned that Notre Dame was on fire, how we felt about it. Many of us who'd never even been there. Imagine the disciples hearing Jesus say that this marvelous, sacred, enduring thing at the heart of Judaism was going to be torn down stone by stone. And when they finally gather themselves, they ask the question that all of us would ask. When? When will this be? How will we know that this is coming? What should we be looking out for? This sounds like a really terrible thing. So the disciples, they want signs, they want timelines, anything that they can hold on to in terms of certainty, they're asking about. Do you know how fascinated Christians throughout history have been with Jesus' response to their question, when? When will this happen? Throughout the centuries, but especially in the last 2 centuries, where Jesus talks about wars and rumors of wars and famines and earthquakes, Christians have tried to use these words of Jesus, which we read a portion of this morning. They've tried to use it to predict the future. When will the end times come? They've turned it into charts and timelines. They've written books and launched TV shows. How many of you remember a book that came out in the late 50s called The Late Great Planet Earth? Who remembers that, by John Hagee? If you know what it is, we should form a little support group. Because this one kind of section of evangelical Christianity that has been obsessed with when the end times are going to happen. And so they proclaim dates. And spoiler alert, every one of them has come and passed, and still, as far as I know, Jesus has not returned, unless we're all left behind somehow. And it's like, I missed one detail in Jesus' words. And so let's change the timeline. And now there's another timeline and when things are going to come to an end. It's almost as if where Jesus says, don't be led astray. And the church was like, oh, I think he said, do your best to be led astray. But here's what we have to remember, and this is really important. When the gospel writers put these words into their gospel, the one we read today, the temple had already been destroyed. So we know that the great revolt of the Zealots happened in 66 AD, which culminated in Rome sending soldiers to Jerusalem and tearing down the temple, burning it to the ground along with the rest of Jerusalem. So we have to remember that the people reading Luke's words, they were not anticipating the destruction of Jerusalem. They were living in the aftermath of the destruction. So we read these words and we're like, oh, maybe Jesus is talking about what's going to happen in the future. It had already happened. So Luke isn't saying, hey, someday this will happen. Luke is saying, this is the world we are already in. Are you guys with me right now? A world where the structures we trusted can fall. And Jesus told us not to trust in these structures. A world where the things we thought would last forever, they don't. So Luke is writing to a community that already knows what it's like to lose the thing they most counted on. A community that already knows what it means to live in great uncertainty. Now, I know that none of us are first century Jews looking at the temple. None of us are anticipating Rome sending soldiers over the horizon. We're not waiting for stones to fall. But we do live in times where things feel a little shaky. Can I get an amen to that? We do know what it feels like when the things that seem immovable to us start to crack. And we ask, when? We ask, what's going to happen? How long is it going to be like this for? How long will it last? Just like the disciples. The details might be different, but we know that angst. We know those questions. But here's what I find most fascinating about this morning's gospel. The disciples had Jesus right there. How many of us would just long, if Jesus was just here, we would know exactly what everything is. We wouldn't have to worry anymore. Jesus is right there, right next to them, the one who heals, the one who restores, the one who calms storms, the one who feeds multitudes. And still, they were waiting for something. They were asking when. They were living in hope, but also anxiety. The disciples were living in anticipation and also uncertainty, all at the same time. So what I'm saying is that if the disciples who were standing 3 feet from Jesus didn't escape that sense of waiting, then most likely neither will we. What I'm saying is, this is just how life works. There will always be some area of your life and my life where we are waiting for something. Maybe something big, maybe something small, where you are waiting for something where you're asking the question, when? When will the test results come in? When will the job offer come through? When will the tension ease? When will I be healed? When will the grief soften? When will things feel normal again? When will I know what comes next? What are you waiting for right now? Where is it in your life right now where something feels unresolved, feels unfinished, where you're asking the question, when? We are always, in one way or another, waiting for something. So if it is true that we are always waiting, I can look around this room and I know stories. I know some of you are waiting for big things. If it's true that we're always waiting in one way or another, then the question really isn't, how do I stop waiting? The only question we can ask is, how do I wait well? And I feel like Jesus' response in this passage gives us the first clue. You can take all of this entire section where Jesus is responding to the disciples, and you can really boil it down to one clue. I think what Jesus is saying is, the way you wait well, don't hold your breath. In other words, don't pause your life until the thing you're waiting for arrives. Don't reduce your world to the size of your anxiety. All of us know what that feels like. Don't act like the only moment that matters is a moment that's going to come in the future. Waiting well means recognizing that this moment, yes, even this uncertain moment, feeling like you're still in transition somehow, feeling like you're waiting to land. Oh, I can't wait to just land. That this moment is still full of God. It is still full of meaning. This moment is worth living to the fullest. Someone once described that waiting for a big life change is like standing at a bus stop watching for the bus to come. So the whole time you're there, you ignore the person next to you, the coffee in your hand, the trees around you, everything that's happening, because your eyes are just locked down the street. You're just waiting. And then when the bus finally comes, you realize, I don't think that staring down the road waiting for the bus actually made the bus come any faster than it was going to come. And yet somehow in the midst of this, I missed everything around me as I was waiting. So let me ask you this question. Where in life are you just staring down the street? Waiting for the one thing, and you're not realizing that you are missing something really beautiful in the process, your life. The disciples stood before one of the greatest buildings ever constructed. It was solid, it was immovable. And Jesus said, even this will fall, not to scare them, but to remind them that certainty is a figment of our imagination. The only thing we know for sure, the only thing we can actually count on in life, isn't what you're going to do after you walk out of these doors today. The only thing you can absolutely count on with absolute certainty is this moment right here. This is what we have. Will you close your eyes with me? I'm going to conclude the sermon today this way. I want to invite you to take the deepest breath that you've allowed yourself consciously to take today. Whatever you're waiting for, whatever question you're living in right now, don't hold your breath. It will come when it comes. So don't try to stop waiting. When you're done waiting for this, you're going to be waiting for something else. You'll always be waiting for something somehow. So instead, I invite you today to focus on waiting well. Be faithful in this moment. Open your eyes to this moment. God is here. Not someday, but now. Even in the waiting. Especially in the waiting, there is something beautiful.